this. And like all of the previous Tech Tuesdays that have been through Google Meets, you'll be able to find that recording link in the calendar invite that you got. And I'll also send an update to everyone once that does post into Drive, and I make sure that it is linked into the calendar. I'll update everyone and let them know that the recording is there. And so once you have that, if you need to rewatch anything, we are going to talk about a lot of tools and resources today. Or again, feel free to share that as well. So quick introduction of myself. If you haven't been in any of the Tech Tuesdays that I've done so far, my name is Jake Massey. I work here at NEFEC. I'm a program development and training specialist, specifically for mathematics, though I do work in a lot of different areas as well. But today I'm at home talking about math. So, and by at home, I mean in my my comfortable topic. I'm here in the office. Thankfully, working from home through all of this was a bit stressful, as I'm sure many of you that have children, especially small children, as you see that I have, can certainly be stressful. So I'm happy to be in the office, happy to be talking about math today. But I wanted to go ahead and share with you my email address and my phone number there. If you have any questions after this or throughout the year, any of the resources that we're going to talk about. I'm not the creator or owner of any of these resources. I don't consider myself any kind of guru. I'm just a lover and a consumer of technology and good, especially free resources, which is what we're going to be looking at. So I'm also joined by Chris Pryor from NEFEC as well. He's going to be helping me out a little bit by moderating the chat, kind of giving his input. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, is that Keith Tilford out there, my old friend? Hey, I'm Chris Pryor. I worked in Flagler County for many, many years. This is my 5th year at NEFEC, where I do leadership training and help in the science area. So good morning, everybody. Hey, don't forget to put your district and your name in the chat, or at least put your district in the chat so that I can mark you present. And so good luck, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you for that reminder, Chris. So let's we're going to be talking about manipulatives today, and a little bit more than just manipulatives, because it's all going to be about virtual manipulatives and using manipulatives and mathematics resources in the virtual world. First of all, I hope you're joining me from a laptop or a computer, or maybe even a tablet might be helpful. If you're joining mobily, on a mobile device, on a phone, it may be difficult to do some of the participation today. You can still watch. You may be able to participate to some extent, but a laptop or a computer is going to be best for some of the resources that we're going to be looking at. But to start talking about manipulatives, rather than me giving you any sort of definition, we're all educators, we're all professionals, and so I would love to see what you think. And let's kind of start the collaborative spirit off well today. So let's define this together. So just in the chat, give us some responses here. Manipulatives are blank, and you fill in the blank. What are manipulatives to you? And I'm gonna be quiet for a few minutes and watch some responses come through the chat. Well, I love supports. I love that, supports. That's good. They I've seen both extremes of manipulatives, and I've probably done both extremes as a teacher, where I rely far too heavily on manipulatives, or don't rely on manipulatives enough. And so I think support is such a great word, because to me that implies the balance. Like, we still need We still need the, I guess we could say, the more traditional, the non-manipulative type of learning and stimulus. Students need that, but the manipulative certainly support. That's great. Learning tools, hands-on. I see a lot of hands-on. In the virtual world, hands-on might mean something a little bit different. Any item used to help students learn. Concrete items. I like the word concrete. I mean, we may use that word a little bit today. All right, so let's get a little more specific in definitions here. And so maybe this is something you're familiar with, maybe it's not. But let's try to extend this. Virtual manipulatives are. And again, I'll watch the chat as you guys respond to this and maybe revise some of your original responses. New to me. I like that. Diagrams, charts, videos. The reason that I'm here. I love those sort of responses. That brutal honesty is what we need sometimes. All right, so feel free to continue typing in the chat, and throughout the day, we're going to be using the chat quite a bit. We are going to be a little more collaborative on this Tech Tuesday than some of the other ones that you may have been a part of that I led. Just the nature of what we're going to be doing, and as we get closer to to kids coming back to school in whatever format your district may be doing, I think we're all getting a little scared of what this face-to-face, virtual, hybrid model may look like. And so I want to try to do a few things that I think you could maybe take, whether you're using manipulatives or not, or if you are going to use some of these tools, what are some ways that you could adapt those and use them in your classroom for students that are both in your classroom and virtual. So we're going to try to stay a little collaborative today as well. So use the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself and speak up as well. I think we can all be free to do that. So I want to share just a couple quotes with you real quick, or I guess a statement and a quote. So this is a statement from NCTM in 2013. I'm going to read it to you, and then I want you just to think on it for a moment. And in the chat, then I want you to respond what smaller portion of this statement, maybe one word or two words, or a small part of a sentence, resonates with you most. So in order to develop every student's mathematical proficiency, leaders and teachers must systematically integrate the use of concrete and virtual manipulatives into classroom instruction at all grade levels. So the objective here for you, again, is what part of this, maybe it's one or two words or a couple more, resonates with you the most. And feel free to respond more than once. I see all grade levels coming in. Yeah, for me, that's one of the first things that stuck out as well. I taught in lots of various grade levels, everything from second grade all the way up to Algebra 2. And I will tell you, the higher levels I taught, the easier it was for me to forget how important manipulatives are. And I know this is a focus on an elementary session, and so a lot of it may come a little easier. And the tools we're going to look at focus on elementary. Later in the day, we're also going to be doing another session on secondary. And so all grade levels, yeah, that's really important to me as well, that at every level, it doesn't expire once they've learned a certain level of mathematics and they're beyond the basics and they don't need it anymore. It's still as important. Another one that I see a lot of responses, systematically integrate. That's, if I had to name probably the two things that I see that I think are probably the most important, and just in my opinion, are probably those two, which are what I'm seeing the most here. So the systematically integrate and all grade levels. And so speaking of that systematic integration, something that I think is really important, and I saw this quote a long time ago, and it's something I've always tried to remember. It's an older quote, but when things are good. I don't think they expire. Although kinesthetic experiences, so thinking about manipulatives, can enhance perception and thinking. And this is the big part. Understanding does not travel through the fingertips and up the arm. Manipulatives aren't this magic answer that once they touch a unifix cube, they automatically understand fractions. As teachers, we still have the responsibility to use that tool as the support that it is and help them to make those connections. That's the way our brain works. Our brain works by making connections, and you know, the schemas we have to be able to connect one piece of information to another. It's not magic, and manipulatives aren't that magic bullet that is going to create the connection. So when we use it as a support and we help students see the connections between the concrete manipulatives and the very abstract numbers and symbols that are just human creations about patterns of the universe, again, that doesn't come naturally. We have to help them see those connections. And so I'm going to try real quick to show you a clip of a video of what I mean by that. I've had some success in the past, sometimes not success, sharing videos through Google Meets. So I'm gonna watch the chat. Let me know if you can hear the audio from the video, and then if not, I'm just gonna paste the link into the chat and then give you guys a couple minutes to watch it. But what this video is, it's one of my favorite math educators, Graham Fletcher. He has a YouTube channel with lots of great videos as well, showing the progression of how students understand division. But what he does well, and why I want you to see this, is he's demonstrating sort of what I'm talking about right now, and how we take manipulatives, this concrete thing that we do sort of naturally understand, and build through progression and build a connection to help students understand something that is so abstract in the numbers and the symbols of mathematics that we eventually want them to be proficient with. So I'm going to launch into this and then watch the chat. Hopefully it will work the way it's supposed to. I thought I hyperlinked it, but I guess not. All right, and again, I'll watch the chat. Y'all let me know if you can hear it.
There's no sound.
All right, that was my fear. So I'm gonna copy and paste. I'm gonna copy and paste the link into the chat. You don't have to watch the whole video if you don't want to. By the time he gets up a grade level or so, it's more into the abstract numbers and symbols. It's early on in the video that you see the connection that I'm talking about, where he connects the concrete manipulatives to the abstract numbers and symbols. So I've just pasted that into the chat. I'll stop talking for a moment. I'll actually mute myself so that I won't interfere. And then I'll come back in. The video is 7 minutes long in total, but by the time you've gotten to about 4 minutes or so, I think you'll have seen what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna disappear here for just a couple minutes while you guys watch that. All right, so I'm gonna jump back in now. Once you get to, like I said, I thought it was about the 4 or 5 minute mark. He's really only using the modeled representation and the written representations, and then eventually, especially if you're a fifth grade teacher now, you're familiar with the fifth grade standards. He is going to get to the standard algorithm um, towards the end of the fifth grade and then into the sixth grade world. I do want to say in reference to the grade levels here, this video is, I'm not sure how old it is. It's a few years old. It is as recent as the Common Core standards, which are where his grade levels are coming from, based on the content that he's talking about. And so it is still relevant for us in Florida, where these grade levels are. Moving into the best standards, when we do change standards in the next coming years, there is a little bit of a shift in when some of the standards and algorithms hit. So the grade levels may expire. But what I'm hoping you saw there, and I'm going to back up just a little bit, see if I can catch the screen, pause in a specific place. So you'll see this kind of first place where he is taking these manipulatives and then showing the connection between the manipulatives and this visual written representation, and then turning that into what will eventually become partial quotients for students. And so those are the kinds of connections that we have to make. And so I want to start with all of this. From here on out, we're really just going to focus on the manipulatives. We're just going to focus on the tools. But I wanted to start with this because I think it's really important that we don't get so excited about awesome tools and awesome manipulatives that we forget that they are just tools. They are just supports. We have to help students, and we have to be intentional in how we help students make the connections between the tools that I'm going to show you, if you choose to use those in a classroom, to eventually get to those abstract numbers and symbols that we do want students to develop proficiency with. The link is going to be in the chat. I will eventually share with you the slides as well, and it's linked into the slides as well if you want to go in and watch that video on your own. If you liked that style of video, Graham Fletcher has one of these for the 4 major operations. So it's not just division. He also has one for multiplication, addition, and subtraction, which are great. And they're also great ways to get some ideas on how you can use manipulatives in your classroom. And so these are concrete manipulatives. These are things that you would touch. But virtual manipulatives, we're going to look at some ways that you can actually do the same exact thing, just virtually as well. So you would be able to use these same ideas with some of the tools that we're going to talk about and some of the different things that we may run into this year due to all of our current circumstances. All right, so I'm going to jump back in to the presentation now. And what I'm curious about, and I want to get some more responses from you, what are some manipulatives you have used in the past? And a bonus part of the question, if you want to answer this as well, why? So what are some manipulatives that you have used in the past and why? All right, so I see a lot of base 10 blocks, cubes, unifix cubes. That's one of my favorite. I love unifix cubes. Reckon Rex, Cuisenaire rods, fraction bars, money. Money is a great one. Clocks, Judy clock. Pizza fractions. Yeah, money and pizza. If you can turn something into money or into pizza, students are certainly going to get it. All right, so those are great responses. If you can see as well, I think you should be able to see it. I'm trying out a new feature of PowerPoint. PowerPoint now has a closed captioning, but it is just listening to what I'm saying and trying to dictate that. So if you see anything strange, I promise it wasn't me doing it on purpose, but I'm trying it out to see how well it goes. All right. So with all of that in mind, thinking about the upcoming year and sort of the impetus behind this session and why virtual manipulatives is what will the 2021 year look like? And when I first started planning for this, there were so many questions. I don't think really anyone knew. Districts do have their plans in place now. So I think most of you for now know what your year is going to look like. But I do want to throw out a little caution as well. I think like we saw last year and like we saw through the summer, things can very rapidly change as well. So I think we do need to be prepared for sort of anything that may be thrown at us. But some of the different scenarios that you might be faced with, depending on what your district is, what your district has chosen to do, because every district sort of has varying degrees of decisions. You might be face-to-face with your students with some social isolation. You might be virtual with your students. You might be teaching virtually to your students. You might have students joining you virtually. I think many of you were also in the scenario where you're going to have some of both. Sometimes you'll be in your classroom teaching to some students while some students are joining virtually. And some of you may be at home teaching virtually to some students that are learning virtually and some that are learning in the brick and mortar classroom. You may have some students that are synchronous, so they're learning with you as you are teaching and as your brick and mortar students are learning. And you may have some students that are asynchronous. So there's lots of degrees of variation. But what I want to point out is from one extreme to the other, whether you are completely face-to-face with the social isolation necessary to keep you safe and to keep students safe and to keep the community safe, or whether you are in a completely virtual environment like we found ourselves in at the end of last year. On either ends of those spectrums, concrete manipulatives aren't really options. If you're face-to-face with social isolation, obviously concrete manipulatives, unless you have a set of everything for every student. And if you're a secondary teacher, do you have 100 sets of algebra tiles? If you are an elementary teacher, do you have 22 sets of fraction tiles or unifix cubes? Because we obviously don't want students sharing those concrete manipulatives. Or on the other end of the spectrum, if you are completely virtual, you obviously don't have that face-to-face access with them to even pass out the manipulatives. So on either end of the spectrum, if you're going to be using manipulatives, which we know research says is such an important piece of learning, such an important piece of the progression, we're going to have to rely on some virtual tools and some ways that we can virtually help students make those concrete connections so that we can begin to help them see the connections then to the abstract numbers and symbols of mathematics. Now, when we're talking about virtual manipulatives, I took this as another resource or another sort of some wording that I took from NCTM. I don't know if any of you are members of NCTM, but they have been doing this summer for their members what they called 100 days of professional learning. And so every day starting, I think we're in the 70s or so by now. I've watched, certainly not all of them, but many of them, an hour of professional learning every day. And they did one on virtual manipulatives. It was sort of what gave me the motivation to do this. And they broke down the degrees of virtual integration like this. They called it the SAMR model. And so starting at the top, we have substitution. So this is just a direct substitute. There's really no functional change of the manipulative. If I'm using, base 10 flats, rods, and units in my classroom, the substitution of the virtual of that is just a screen where I have virtual flats, rods, and units that I can drag around just like I would on the desk. So there's not really any functional change. It's just a direct substitution. And then augmentation is where we have that direct substitute, but a little bit of functional improvement. For example, maybe I can copy and paste. So I have my rods and my units and my flats set up in a way that I need, but I'm working on multiplication. And so rather than having to physically, grab that many things more, maybe I can drag and select everything and then copy and paste it 5 times. And that represents multiplying by 5. So that's a functional improvement of just a direct substitute. And I will say most of what we're going to look at today is going to live in the realm of augmentation. I want you to be comfortable with what you're seeing. So for the most part, they are direct substitutes. They look like the manipulatives that you're used to seeing, that you're used to using, that many of you mentioned just a moment ago in the chat. But they do have some functional improvements. And then modification, we start to have some significant task redesign. We're able to do some things that maybe were just not conducive to doing with concrete manipulatives, and then all the way up to redefinition. So this is the creation of something completely new, something that was inconceivable, impossible, something that could not be done with concrete manipulatives or any concrete tool, something that has to exist in the virtual realm. And there's certainly lots of those as well. But like I said, we're going to be talking mostly in the augmentation, maybe getting a little bit into the modification realm, because I want you to be comfortable with the tools that you're seeing. But we want to step it up a little bit more than just that direct substitution. All right, now this is really the first question that I had when I started to think about this. If I think about the face-to-face brick and mortar classroom and my students are working with manipulatives, it's very easy for me to see what they're doing, for me to see their thinking, and to give that immediate feedback. But in the virtual world, if I have some students in my classroom and some students at home, or all of my students are at home, or if I'm at home and I'm not in my classroom with my students, I don't have that ability anymore. So how are we going to share ideas with each other? How are students going to share their ideas and share their products with me as the teacher? And so I want to share with you a few ideas that I've had, and then give you a moment as well to think on that and share some ideas or things that you may be willing to try in the classroom as well. So a few things. The snipping tool. If you're using a PC, Windows operating system has what comes on every Windows machine, the snipping tool. If you've never used that, it's a pretty easy tool. It allows you to kind of drag and take a picture of anything on your screen. If you're working on a Mac, screenshots are pretty easy. If you weren't aware of this and you're using a Mac, Command Shift 3. If you hold the Command key, hold Shift, and then hit 3, it will take a shot, a picture of your screen, and automatically save that to your desktop. And then you'll have that. Most students have access to smartphones, if not having a smartphone for themselves. So cell phone cameras, some virtual manipulatives are mobile friendly. So they could even just take a screenshot on their cell phone, what they're doing mobily. And then to share that with you, some ideas that I had, some forms of of virtual learning or of streaming or communicating with each other, like Microsoft Teams and Zoom. I know both of those for sure. You can enter files into the chat. You can enter pictures or video files into the chat so they could share directly that way. If you're using one of those mediums for your instruction, they could be emailed. You can use Google Forms for submissions. This Google Forms a year ago would have been a little bit of a problem, but file size restrictions have been loosened up a lot in Google Forms. And so you can actually use Google Forms to collect as well. But what I do want to mention is whatever you do, whatever you decide to do, it must be pre-taught, regardless of your level. If you're K1 and 2, if you're 3, 4, or 5, or even if you're at the secondary level, it must be pre-taught. We can't assume that students know how to do it or that they know the process that you expect. So before getting into the virtual manipulatives, you are going to have to pre-teach students, hey, we're going to be using some tools, but I'm going to need you to be able to share with me. And here are some ways, or here's how we're going to do that. And so we're actually going to be doing some of that today. You guys are going to be playing with some of these manipulatives, and I want you to have the ability to share with me or to share with the group. And so we are going to use a Google form to do that. And so I'm going to do a little bit of pre-teaching now and show you how we're going to do that. I'm going to add a link into the Google chat, or into the chat here in Google Meets. You don't need this link yet. But once we get to where we will share, this is the link that you're going to use. This is the link that will take you to a Google form where you're going to share. So at any point that we're sharing any of the images or screenshots that you take of your manipulatives, that link that I just shared, and I can share it again later if I need to, is where you will do that. So I'm going to jump out of presentation mode here. I actually have a Mac and a PC in front of me so that I can sort of pre-teach or demonstrate for you whatever device you're on, how we're gonna do this. So I'm gonna go into this isn't necessarily something that we're going to do in the elementary session, but it is something that I already have brought up. So let's say this is what I've done. This is the product that I want to share. Right now, I'm on my Mac, so I'm going to hold Command and then press Shift, hold Shift, and then press 3. And so now you'll see at the bottom of my screen where that little screenshot came up. That is automatically going to save to my desktop. Working on the Mac, that's the default. I don't have to change any settings to make that happen. So I'm not even going to click on it. That's okay. So now I'm going to go back into our chat so that I can find that link. I'm going to open this Google form. All right, and we'll see our Google form. So I'm going to put in my email address. And if I was doing this with students, this would definitely be something I would require. I need to know who is submitting it. So email address there is enough for me. I'm going to add my file. If you have saved it to your drive, you could go into your drive. But for this demonstration for the Mac, it's automatically saved it to my desktop. So I'm going to select files from my device, go to my desktop. You'll see all my screenshots here. I love that Mac puts the time of the screenshot in the title. So right now it's 9:39. So it means it must have been this one at 9:38. Yep, and there it is. So I'm going to add that into the Google form. I'm also asking you here, may I share your response with the class? And so I want you to be able to decide. I would like to share some of the responses you guys give me later with all of us here. And with students, maybe or may not would be something that I would ask, but we're all professionals, and so I want to be respectful. So I'm asking that. So I'm going to just say yes, click submit, and now I've got that. I have left this open to submit another response because I may have you share more than once. So that's done. That's the process for Mac. Pretty easy. That's how we're going to do that. And if you're working on a Mac right now, that's how you're going to do it. So I'm going to stop my sharing on this device here and jump over to my PC. I have a PC up as well. I'm going to share this screen and show you the process for doing this if you're working on any PC, any Windows-based machine. So, you know, Dell, etc. I think this is a Dell that I'm working on here now, but it won't matter if it's any Windows-based machine. This is how you'll do that. So let's say I've got this brought up. This is what I need to turn in for the class. So there are a few ways to do this. What I think is probably the least amount of steps or digging through files, at least, is using the snipping tool. So I'm just gonna hit the search here at the bottom left of my screen and search snip, and then open up the snipping tool. And for the snipping tool, I actually think this works a little better than a screenshot. A screenshot takes a picture of your entire screen, everything on your window. The snipping tool, when I click new, is going to actually allow me to select by just clicking and dragging what I want to take a picture of. So now I'm not actually taking a picture of the whole screen. I'm just taking a picture of what's inside this little red rectangle here. So once I let the mouse go, it's taking a screenshot. Sometimes it will pop up. For some reason it didn't this time, but down here at the bottom, I see where my snipping tool is at. So I'm just going to click there and it opens up my image. One of the things that is a little different here on the Mac, it automatically saves it to your desktop. Here it doesn't automatically save it, but we're just going to save it like we would save any file. File, save as. Just for easy access, I'm going to save it to the desktop and call it clock icon. I'm actually going to call it clock task 1. I've already done this as a test, so it won't let me save it as clock task. I'll save it as clock task 1. Hit save, and now I can close this. It's saved. And then from here, the steps are exactly the same. I need the link to my Google form. So I'm going to open up that Google form, type in my email address. I'm going to add my file, upload that file. Do I want to share? Yes. And this is just a form that I created. If you have any questions on creating a form, if this is the way that you want to have students share with you, reach out to me after the session and I'll help you with that. And then submit. And now that is done. And so I could submit another if I wanted to submit another. And so that is showing you there for both Windows and Mac operating systems, how you can capture that screenshot so that students have a way to share. So I want to stop here for just a moment and see if you have any ideas of other creative ways that you're thinking of right now that you may have students share, maybe some tools or shortcuts that I'm not familiar with that you want to share. But I want to give you a second to be collaborative in the chat. What are some thoughts and different ways that you think students could share their screen back with you? Oh, all right. Command-Shift-4, you can snip. I didn't know that. I've been a Mac user for a long time. I feel silly for not knowing that one. I got to try it out now. Command-Shift-4. How about that? Awesome. I'm going to have to change my slide for my next presentation now. It's a good shortcut there. Class Dojo, that's a great idea. Another one that I thought of, but I'd never used it myself, so I didn't put it in. My daughter used Flipgrid in her class last year, and it seemed like a good way just to sort of share ideas on a wall. And so maybe instead of using Google Form, potentially, again, I didn't put it because I wasn't sure, but maybe Flipgrid could be a place for students to share. Seesaw, I'll have to check that one out. Or even Google Classroom. If you use Google Classroom, that's a great place to share. Google Doc, oh, that's a great one. Students could collaborate on it, work there. So all the tools that we're going to look at are web-based tools. So you could certainly link any of the URLs into Canvas, but it's going to take them out of Canvas. I haven't checked to see if any of them are integrated into Canvas, but they are just web-based tools. Now, you could use Canvas to collect their responses. So you could set up an assignment where in your instructions, you've given them a link and a URL and the instructions for the task, and then their what they have to turn in Canvas would be the screenshot of their product or their task of the virtual manipulative. All right. I just realized I was in the wrong one there. Very similar, but had the secondary tool coming up. I knew that wasn't right. Okay, so now we're going to actually dive into some of these resources. And so the first one we're going to look at, and I've got this here if you want to write it down or take a screenshot of it if you want to use a new tool that you may have just learned. Org. You could just go to there. That's a little easier to remember, mathlearningcenter.org, and then you would just click resources and then click apps. But if you want to remember this whole URL or write it down, this will take you straight to the virtual manipulatives that we're going to look at. So I'm going to go straight here and then show you sort of all of their resources. All right, so again, I love this word. This is my favorite word in the field of education, free. When things are free, I love it. And these are free, they call them apps. These actually are friendly mobily as well. Now, I think maybe going back and forth mobily to Google Meets may be a little difficult, but if you're just working on these, they are friendly mobile as well. So here are some of the things that may look familiar to you. They're sort of in the realm between the substitution and the augmentation. So they do look like familiar resources. Where we have clocks, we have number frames, number lines, the number pieces. This is your base 10 stuff, your flats, rods, and your units, fraction tiles, number racks, which I think is an abacus. Yep, so you can create different abacuses there, geoboards, vocabulary cards, lots of great stuff here. Pattern shapes. This is a really good one. And so when you find the one that you want to look at, I'm just gonna click, let's say here, number pieces. I'm gonna open web app, and now I have this sort of virtual screen here with all of my virtual manipulatives, and I can just click to bring them in. I can keep clicking and have as many as I want. That is one of the kind of functional improvements of the virtual manipulative here, is I sort of have an infinite amount of these, which is great. Having enough resources has always been such a big problem. So I'm going to go back to PowerPoint in case anyone missed that link, mathlearningcenter.org/resources/apps. So make sure you have that. But for now, I want you to just open up a new tab. Make sure you leave this one open. Don't hang up on me. I'll have flashbacks from high school. So open up a new tab and navigate to bit.ly, bit.ly / this is all lowercase, NEFEC TT, like for Tech Tuesday, EM, for elementary math, 1. So bit.ly/nefec-TTEM1. I'll type that into the chat as well, and then you should just be able to click on it. And this is going to take you straight to one of those apps. I just made a short link for it. This may be something you want to do for your students, especially if they're K1 or 2 and you're worried about them navigating or being able to type in a URL accurately. If they're working in, if you're working with them through Google Meets or Teams or Zoom or something like that, you can create a short link for them. It's easier to remember and type in, or they can just copy and paste it from the chat straight into there. So I want you to go to that link. It's going to take you to one of the tools, to the fraction tiles. And first, I just want you to take a moment to explore the tools. And then once you've taken a moment to explore the tools, I want you to jump back into the chat and enter some noticings or wonderings that you have about the tool. What are some things you notice about using the tool? What are some things that you like, some things you dislike? And what are maybe some questions that you have around use of this first tool that we're looking at? All right, so the first comment we have, you can resize the bar. They can make the bar whatever size they want and color in the parts. Great question. Is there a way to show students what you're doing in real time? So you could, it's a great, another use for these tools as a tool for instruction on your part. So if you're using, Google Meets or Microsoft Teams, Zoom, any of those, you can just share your screen, and whatever you're doing in the manipulative on that screen is what they're going to see. So you could certainly use this as a tool and just share your screen in some sort of virtual meeting with students, or even in the classroom in brick and mortar on your projector. It is just a web tool, so it is shareable everywhere. How do you unshade a selection? That's not something I've tried to do, so I'm not sure. I do know that if you just click on the whole bar and then click the trash can at the bottom, it will delete that, and then you could just remake that specific bar. I'm not sure about unshading a section though, but maybe unshading, I wonder if there's a way, because that could be a cool way to teach certain things, if you're shading and unshading, if you're adding or subtracting fractions. That could be important. If anybody figures out how to shade and unshade, tap apart to remove fill. Or just click at the box again. All right, maybe that'll work. You can change the color. Yep, that's a functional improvement there. That's not something we can do in real life. We can't tap a fraction bar and change it from blue to red in real life. And that seems silly and quirky, but being able to change the color might make a very important distinction for something that you're trying to teach. Using more than one color, I think if you select the color at the bottom, like if you click the red bar, and then everything you click will be red. And then if you go down and click the blue bar, now everything you click is going to be blue. So you just have to go back down to the bottom and change color each time you want to change color. Awesome, awesome. All right, so hopefully everyone is ready for their first task. So we're going to do some math. I think the best way to learn math and to learn new tools is just to do it. So we're going to do a task here. This aligns to, I should have looked this up in advance, but off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure it aligns to a fourth grade standard. So here's some practice for you. So if you'll flip back to the Google Meets tab so that you can see the screen, but don't close your other tab. You're going to need that. Um, use the tools provided in that tab to demonstrate that 4/5 is greater than 2/3. So use the tools to demonstrate that 4/5 is greater than 2/3. And then once you've done that, I would like you to take a screenshot or a snip and then share that with me through the Google form. And I will paste the link to the Google form back in the chat so that it's here at the bottom and you don't have to scroll through again to get that link. So again, we are demonstrating that 4/5 is greater than 2/3. And I would like to share some of your responses in a few minutes, so make sure you answer that last question on the form, whether or not you're comfortable with me sharing your responses with everyone. I'm not sure if this is what you were trying to do, but unfortunately, if you just share the URL, it's just going to share a blank version of the resource. It won't actually share your current work. We are going to look at another resource later that does have that feature, but just sharing the URL is just going to share the blank one. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that I can go into the Google form as everyone is submitting their screenshots. And then once I see a few have come in, and I've given a little bit of time, I'm going to start sharing some of the ones that you guys have said are okay with me sharing. So into the Google form, using the first resource that we're looking at, the fraction tiles on Math Learning Center, you're going to demonstrate that 4/5 is greater than 2/3. And then once you have that, you're taking just a screenshot or a snip of your task there where you're showing using those resources that 4/5 is greater than 2/3. That's what you're submitting to the Google form. Awesome. I'm seeing some submissions come in. These look great. Oh, we've got using some different parts of that. Awesome. The first two that I looked at were different, and that's exciting. I love seeing the different ways that we think. Oh, the first three that I've seen are different. That's awesome. To snip, the way that I always bring it up is just I go to the search bar at the bottom of the window, and I just search snip, and it comes up. Um, and then you can also just search by, yeah, someone just put it in the chat. I always forget about that shortcut because I don't use PC very often. You can click the Windows key and then type snip. Hitting the Windows key will bring up the search bar for you. Ooh, we've got one even with the abstract numbers and symbols included. Awesome. These are great. Thank y'all. Thank y'all. All right, so I'm going to give another couple minutes here for anyone that may need just a little more time creating their representation or sharing that representation. So I'm going to give a little bit more time, but I am going to continue looking through all of them and find some good ones to share. All right, it is 10:02. I'm going to give you until 10:05 to continue sharing, and then we'll do some share outs as a group with the responses that I've been getting. And I love how brave everyone is. I've gotten all yeses to the last question. Oh, I think we also, Heather, do you mind sharing with everyone what that shortcut is for Chromebooks?
Yes, if you have a Chromebook, it's just easier to explain it. It's Command Shift, and then above the I kind of called it with my teachers. It's the rods and flat button right above the 6 and 7. It's the switch screen button, but it looks like a rectangle and a line, a rod and a flat, and those three pushed together will take a screenshot.
Awesome. And do you know where, I'm not very familiar with Chromebooks. Do you know where it saves it when you do the screenshot on a Chromebook?
Gosh, I haven't used my Chromebook in a couple months because I've been at home. I want to say into your downloads.
Okay.
I think, yeah, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I haven't used a Chromebook in probably 3 or 4 years, but if I recall, that does sound right. I think I remember most default things on the Chromebook went into downloads. All right, so just a little less than a minute. If you have any submissions, and I've gotten about double the submissions that I had prior to that 3-minute warning. So I'm glad I waited a little bit longer because I've gotten some really good ones here towards the end as well. And so I want to make sure that I value everyone who's willing to submit. All right, so I've got 10:05, and so what I'm going to do now is reshare my screen. I have some tabs brought up with some images that you guys have submitted of this task. And so what I want to do, I want to first give you the option to talk through your thinking on your own. So I have a few of them brought up. I'm just going to open, let's say, 5 of them. And if you recognize your image, I'm gonna give you the first, kind of the first dibs at explaining it. So if you want to take about 30 seconds to talk through your thinking, that would be awesome. You can just unmute yourself and talk through it. If you don't feel comfortable, after about 10 seconds or so, I'll just start speaking, talk through some things that I really like about it as well. So I'm going to go ahead, share my screen here, and open up the first one I have. So if you recognize that, and your name's actually in the file, of it as well. So if you want to share, go ahead. If not, perfect.
So I use this model because to me it was just the most basic one, and I'm new to this virtual manipulative, so it seemed like the easiest one at first. And I like how when you click on the fractions, it'll actually show you the fraction to the left of the model. And I try to line them up so that the student can see not only the fractions are different, but the representation, especially with the students who are just starting out. I know the visual representation is important.
Awesome, awesome. And I want to point out here as well that both of your fraction bars are the same size. From the left side to the right side, they are the same length, and that's a really important piece of understanding as well. I believe the default on this tool when you're creating fractions of different sizes is that it's going to, even if you create your first one and you make it larger, when you create your second one, it's going to automatically make it the same size as the one that you resized. But then you can resize them once they are there. But it is important if we're talking about comparing that we do make sure they are the same size. So I've got another one here using a little different model. I love just immediately upon opening them, the diversity of the submissions. This was great. So if you want to explain, go ahead. If not, I'll speak up after a second.
I teach second grade, and we do fractions at the very end of the year. And anytime I can bring in food as manipulatives, I always do. And pizza is always a really big thing when talking about fractions. So I wanted to use the circle. And just this way, using the same color, I'm able to show them that, they are the same piece, and look how much, one versus the other, how much is left or how much is colored red, different things like that, just so visually they can recognize that it's the same shape and one has more colored in red than the other.
Good, awesome. I like that. All right, let's do a couple more here. I like this one. It's very similar to one of the others, but there is another step here that I thought was interesting that it was included. All right, so this is very similar to one of the other models, but I do love the inclusion of this abstract numbers and symbols. We talked earlier about the importance of helping students make those connections. So including the visual concrete, I know it's not quite as concrete because we aren't really touching it, but it is still very visually concrete, so we can see it. And then showing the connection, what that looks like with the very abstract numbers and symbols that we have. So I'm gonna do one more. All right, so this is I think this is the last one that I'm going to show here. If you feel free to chime in if you want, and if not, I will. All right. So I really liked this one because they're in a different orientation. I think as teachers, we can, if we're not intentional about changing the way things look, students can become very conditioned to only seeing things one way. Right? We're only comparing fractions if our fraction bars are horizontal. And we may not have intentionally chosen to never show anything in a vertical orientation. But if we don't, we could unintentionally reinforce a false belief or a false understanding of fractions. So I think changing things up is great. And these virtual manipulatives allow you to change things up. So I wanted to show that as well. And if this is an activity that you would do with your students and you would share, I really would encourage you. I went through every picture that you guys submitted, and I very intentionally chose, I actually chose more than 4, but just for the sake of time, I just wanted to share 4. I chose different images that were set up differently for different reasons and different purposes, and I would want to share that with students, just like I want to share that, with y'all. And so someone's asking about changing the orientation. I believe if you click on the bar, and this is true for any of the apps on Math Learning Center, if you click on the bar, you'll get, and I'll demonstrate this in a minute, you'll get a menu, and one of those options in the menu is like a little circle arrow, and that's what will allow you to change the orientation. All right, so I'm gonna share the, we don't need that one. That one's the secondary one again. All right, so I'm going to go back to our presentation, and let's do a little summary, a little recap here. So some things to consider, and you can answer this in the chat. How is this the same? And so by that I mean as the concrete manipulatives, if we had actual fraction tiles in front of us. Considering good or bad, how is it the same in good ways? How is it the same in bad ways? So how is this virtual version the same? All right, and I'll go ahead and throw up the next question as well, because I think everyone is wanting to go ahead and answer the. You're reading my mind, reading ahead on the slide here. How is it different as well? And it could be for better, it could be for worse. I do think there are some things that don't work as well in the virtual world. So what are some things that are better? What are some things that are worse? Oh, I love the knot is messy. Oh, that's always fun. Having a floor full of 700 units all over the place when you're working with your base 10. They're not getting that actual tactile touch. Yeah, it is still the visual representation, and hopefully for the way the brain works and building the schema, we can accomplish the same sort of thing, but they aren't actually physically touching it. And then there is a difference there. Yeah, they need a few more skills. They need skills using the mouse. It is a little more difficult to click and to drag than to just physically pick something up, especially in the K1 and 2 world. There is a learning curve that doesn't apply to concrete manipulatives. Saving and sharing. Yeah, we have very easy ways to document students' thinking. Being able to change the color. Yeah, if I bought, a set of blue, all blue Unifix cubes, I'm stuck with all blue unless I buy another set. Time consuming, yeah. But the truth is, I think right now, so much is going to have to be virtual that these are skills that we're going to have to teach students and sort of pre-teach and front load regardless of the decisions that we make. So I don't think it is a bigger burden than we're already looking at and having to front load some technology skills, especially in the K1 and 2 world. I mean, I have a son who's going into first grade, and I'm constantly thinking about, you know, the troubles that he may have, and working with him last year as a kindergartner when he then became a virtual student. You know, I've seen it firsthand, but I've also seen it turn around and him get, you know, very good at using the device. And by the end of it, it was much easier on me because he would just grab his computer and use his Clever badge and log in, and most days he would be done with his work before I even realized it, and I would have to go back and check. So they can get there, but it does take time. All right, so thinking about the SAMR model, the different degrees of virtual integration, the resource that we just used and the task that we just did, where do you think that lands on the SAMR model? All right, seems like everyone was paying attention. And I guess I sort of answered this question at the beginning, that most of what we were going to do was going to be an augmentation. And yeah, I think this mostly lands in the augmentation world. It is a familiar resource. It's something that we have a concrete version of that we have used. But we've talked about some of those new features that are available to students that we don't have with the concrete. And I don't think they are significant changes. They're certainly changes that are very valuable. But yeah, I think mostly in augmentation, in substitution, I do understand that as well, because apart from just a small few things like maybe being able to copy and paste or change the colors, what we're actually doing with them once we have them set the way we want is exactly the same as what we would do with a concrete fraction tile that's sort of in our hand. Now, the next thing that I want to show you with Math Learning Center here, this same set of apps, is a sharing feature that's only available here. So this is a resource that's available through this site. So this isn't something that you're going to be able to apply to some of the other resources that we're going to look at after this. And it's also not available to all of the apps on this site. I think it's only 5 for now, but they are expanding it. So I've got another link for you here, bit.ly/nefect.ttem, almost the same, except instead of 1, now it's a 2. This is the second link that I'm giving you. This is going to take you to a different resource. It's the 10 frame, essentially, the counters, the number counters that you can sort of build 10 frames with. So I'll give everyone a second to go there. And then once you're there, I'm going to temporarily jump out of the PowerPoint to help you locate one of the buttons on there that's new, wasn't on the previous one that we just did, and then show you how you're going to actually connect to a task that I've already made. So I've set some of the manipulatives up and added a question. And this is a way that you could share something more specific with students rather than just sharing a blank setup for them. So that's bit.ly/ all lowercase NEFECTTEM2. And I did just put that in the chat because I'm temporarily going to jump out of PowerPoint. I'm going to go go there myself, bit.ly/NEFEC, Tech Tuesday, Elementary Math. That's the TTEM 2. And so it'll just bring up this blank, this blank one here. But near the bottom, you'll see a little key. It's towards the right on the blue bar. Hopefully you can see my cursor kind of circling it. There's a little key here. And if you click this key, you're going to be able to enter a code. And in just a second, I'm going to put the code back up. You may want to write it down because you'll have to navigate from one tab to another. But you're going to enter a code into there. And once you enter the code, it is going to bring up the task that I have created for you. And then I want you to take a minute to manipulate, complete the task. But this time, don't worry about taking a screenshot or using the snipping tool. We're going to share it in a different way, something that's only available on this specific resource. So I'm going to jump back into PowerPoint now. This is the code you're going to type in, and it will bring up the task that I created. We'll type in the code into the chat as well. And when you click open, you should get this task. So I'm just asking you to find the sum of the given numbers. And you can approach this and answer it. You can model or show the sum in any way that you want. I'm going to give, so to find that again, it's the little key at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. So it's third from the end on all of your little menu options at the bottom on that blue bar of the window. So you're going to click the key, and then you will enter in the code, which is in the chat now if you need it. And again, once you have done that, and I'll give everyone a couple minutes to kind of manipulate and play, model the sum however you want. But make sure it is clear. Make sure that your modeled response is clear. Don't worry about taking a screenshot or snipping. With this tool, there's actually a much easier way to share, a lot less steps. But again, it is only available for this and 4 other of the resources on Math Learning Center. So I'm going to give everyone about 1 more minute, and then I'll give you the rest of the instructions for this task. It doesn't mean you have to be done in 1 more minute, but I'm going to give you a little longer before I complete the instructions. All right. So when you're ready to, when you have completed, right next to the key and the little key at the bottom that you click to add the code, and I do have an image of this up on the screen share if you want to come back to the tab when you're done to see it. Right next to the key, there's a little share icon. It's a little box with the arrow coming out of it. That's sort of become the universal icon for sharing. You've probably seen that on your phone or other apps and things before. If you click that, you'll have the option to save an image, copy the image, or you just copy and paste somewhere. It will provide a link, and that link will actually be a live link, or not a live link, but a link with a copy of the manipulatives as you have them set up when you copy the link. And it will also give you a share code. So this is how you, if you wanted to set up a task for your students, this is also how you would get the share code like I gave you. So you could set up a task, type in a question, set the manipulatives up the way that you want them set up to start with, and then you would click there and get that share code, and that code is what you would share with students the same way that I shared with you. So when you get done, if you feel comfortable doing so, open up that share icon and copy and paste the link out of there into the chat, and only if you feel comfortable. And then I'll go into the chat and open up a couple of them the same way I did last time. And I think things like this could be really great, even in a hybrid model of a classroom, where if I have some students in my classroom, in my brick and mortar room with me, and then I have some students that are at home that are required to be synchronous with me, how am I going to teach to, the 12 kids in my room and the 10 kids in their living rooms at the same time? Using these virtual resources that allow us to come together and collaborate are going to be a great way to sort of do that, because the students don't have to be at home to do this. I could still use this in my brick and mortar classroom, and students at home can also use it. So it'd be a great way to do that. All right, so I've got some responses coming in already. Awesome. All right. So you'll notice when I click on that link there, it's taken straight to that response. So it looks like, I love, I'm assuming here, to save a little time because it is already 10:30, I'm just going to talk through it for you. So sorry if I get your thinking all wrong here. But it looks like we went into pairs and then maybe just counted by twos. Maybe a student that does this is comfortable skip counting by twos. And so that is a great strategy. And I would love, to hear a student kind of talk through that process. All right, looks like we've added some more frames in here, regrouped a little bit, even wrote it out. 16 plus 12 equals 28. Again, with students, I would definitely allow them to talk through it the way that we did with that last example. Just for now, trying to save a little bit of time because there are a few other resources that I want to show you as well. So sorry if I'm cutting short some of your thinking there. All right. I don't know if y'all are like me, but I am a hoarder of tabs. It is very easy for me to pile up tons and tons and tons of tabs. Okay, and so what I want to show you real quick, I just went back to that first link I shared with you, mathlearningcenter.org/resources/apps. It shows you right here, new, share, work with others. These are the five apps where that feature is available. So the number pieces, the number rack, the number line, number frames, and the math clock. Those 5 apps of all of their apps currently have that sharing feature available. So you could do exactly what we just did with any of those. The other ones, it's not there, but I would assume they are coming. It does say coming to more apps this year. So that is encouraging. Hopefully that does happen, because I know that kind of added resource really steps Math Learning Center up, sort of a level above some of the other ones that I'm going to share with you. Now, a couple of the ones I'm going to share with you do also have ways where you can kind of live interact and see how students are working as well. But as far as the sort of substitution augmentation versions of manipulatives, this is something I haven't really found on any other substitution or augmentation version of manipulatives. We are going to look at some things that get into the modification and redefinition as well, and they have some of their own options. Is there a way to lock the screen to prevent others from editing? Could you elaborate a little more on that question? Or maybe, I don't know, maybe I can answer it. So when you share that link, that link is sharing exactly the view as it was shared. So if a student opened that link and changed something, it's not going to change what's on that link. So if a student opened it, made a bunch of changes and closed it, and then you go back and you open that link again, it's still going to be the original version. Anytime a change is made, it's going to change what that URL is. So you were able to edit someone's, but if I went back into someone, whoever you edited, if I went back and clicked on theirs, it would be their original version. It wouldn't have your edits on their version. Hopefully that makes sense. So you would have to get a new link. So sharing again, I'll bring this presentation back up. It's right next to the key, the little share icon. You have a few options. You can save the image. This is really going to do the same thing that a snip or a screenshot would do. You can copy the image and then just paste it somewhere. Like if you were going to email it, maybe that would be a good option. You could just copy and then paste the image into email. And then you can share a link. And then again, this is as a teacher, this is how you would create a share code, or even as students, you could have students create tasks for each other as well and share that code. All right, so we did talk a little bit about this already. I think that sort of does live in the substitution augmentation realm. It is a resource that we do already have a concrete version of, but it is a little more flexibility in that resource than we have in the concrete world, especially thinking about assigning tasks and being able to share. It may be difficult for me to set up a task, on a document camera. In my classroom, I set my manipulatives up, and then I tell students, okay, I want everyone to set their manipulatives up this way. We got to wait a few minutes and then go check on the 5 students who didn't set it up right or are just playing with them instead of setting it up. And we've wasted a little bit of time. And then now I have to, spend the time to go look at everyone's manipulatives individually. This is an augmentation of that. It is a step up. It's an additional feature that's going to save us time. It's going to make it a little bit easier. So we are sort of in that augmentation realm. All right. Allow you to sort of dive into it on your own. I just want to briefly talk about it. Sharing the images, the screenshots, that's great. Products are great. But if you're a mathematician, you know that the math is really in the process. And that's something that we are sort of missing out on so far in the virtual manipulatives and in the virtual world, is I don't get to see a student build. I don't get to see a student's thinking and how they unpack and how they create. I'm relying on them to share what their thinking was. And students may, especially depending on the grade level, may not have the metacognitive abilities to really dive into what their process was and to put that into words or to be able to explain that. And so missing that process is something that is sort of a drawback. So I want to give you a solution to that. Again, I'm not going to go super into detail on this. It's a pretty simple Google extension that you can use, and I know it's a pretty popular one, so maybe something you've already used. But this is called Screencastify, and this is a Google extension. So if you're familiar with Google extensions, it's something you would just add to your Google browser. Now, you can't just add it yourself. If you're going to have students do this, students would have to do it as well, or maybe it would have to be added onto your machines in your classroom. Hopefully that's something that IT could help you do. Again, I don't want to go too deep down this rabbit hole, but it is a way to record what's going on the screen. So if you need to see what students are doing and how students are building, they could use something like Screencastify and then share a video with you instead of a picture. And then you're now getting to see the process as well. I'll just kind of quickly show you because I do have it on my device. So once you've put Screencastify on, hopefully you can see my cursor up here near the top right, this little red button. Once I've put this Google extension on, all I have to do to use Screencastify, so this is an easy lift for students as well. I click that little button, I'm gonna hit record, and it's now recording everything on my screen. When I'm done recording, I hit that button again, I hit stop, and it's going to automatically direct me to a page where my video is at and give me some options for sharing. And so I've actually made a short Screencastify to show you what that looks like. So what you're watching now, this isn't going to be me live. This is going to be a recording I made on Screencastify. And I started recording once I was done recording. So I recorded the process of what it looks like when you're done. So when you're done recording, it's going to automatically take you to this page that you see here. So this is the video of my recording. So you can see like a little play button. This isn't a real play button. That's the play button in my recording. So I'm gonna play this video and you'll see as well, we've got some different sharing options. Share to Google Classroom, publish to YouTube. You can get an embed code. You can download the video. You can export it out as an MP4. So there's lots of different ways to share that video back if you need to see the process. This isn't something I would do a lot. This is a little bit of a big lift. If you've got 6 minute, or you actually can't do 6 minute. I'll talk about that in a second. If you've got 4-minute videos from 20 students, that's a lot of time to watch through there. But occasionally this may be something that you want to see. Or maybe this is, if you're in a hybrid model and you have some students in your class and 5 students at home, this is what you require of the students at home. Because the students in your class, you get to see their process, but students at home, you don't get to see that. So maybe it's a way that you can connect with students at home and see that process. Again, my favorite word, favorite 4-letter word in education is the word free. And it is a free resource. The free version does limit you to 5-minute videos though. But honestly, again, if you're talking about an entire class sharing, 5 minutes is more than enough. 5 times 20, if you're a secondary teacher, 5 times 100, that's a really big number. I don't have 500 minutes to watch 100 students build some algebra tiles. So I think 5 minutes is plenty. If you want to get it, all you got to do, the way I got it, I just Googled Screencastify. I'll actually show you real quick because it is super simple. Just Google Screencastify. It'll come up, Screencastify, #1 screen recorder. I've already installed it, so it's not going to let me click. If you haven't installed it, you're just going to click this button right here. I think you have to click accept maybe one more time, and then it's automatic. It automatically is going to come up here. If it doesn't show right away, you can edit your extensions by clicking this little puzzle piece, and it will allow you to display the extensions you've downloaded. This is the only extension that I have on this machine. So it shows automatically. Again, if you've got more questions, I did give you all my email and phone number. I'd be happy to connect with you if you need some help on Screencastify, but I would be willing to bet it's a pretty popular one, so there might be someone on your campus who's familiar with Screencastify that could give you some one-on-one help with Screencastify. All right, so I'm going to share with you a couple more resources here, a few more resources in our last few minutes. So CPM is another good one. It's very similar to what we just did. And I will share all of these links with you in just a minute, but for now you can just watch. So it looks, like I said, it looks very much the same. We have base 10 blocks. We can click and drag them in. It is just like, it's just like the other. We have some number lines that we can create, different things that we can add in it. Some arrows, we can resize them. We can change the way the arrows and the lines look. Some of this is applicable to elementary. Some of it is not going to be Like you'll see algebra tiles, probably not something you'll use with first grade. And then some other general tools. This is a little more basic than the one I just shared, but it is another resource that I wanted to show you. It doesn't have near as many features. Like I said, it is a little more basic, but it is another resource that I wanted to share. This was kind of the first one that turned me onto virtual manipulatives. As a secondary teacher, I used these algebra tiles a lot. I've since then found another resource that does algebra tiles a lot better. And I'm going to share that in the secondary portion of this afternoon if you join that. Another great one, GeoGebra. If you've ever been in the secondary world, you've probably heard of GeoGebra or maybe even used GeoGebra. But GeoGebra also has great elementary resources, and they actually have a landing page for all of their resources as well, all of the resources that GeoGebra has. So that's the link that I have hyperlinked in there, and that's the link that I will share with you, is a link to all of GeoGebra's resources. And this is where we sort of get into the modification and redefinition. So some of these are highly modified and some of these are completely redefined. And I love this landing page for elementary on GeoGebra because it's going to give you a video demonstrating how the resource works. So you can see they're just silent videos that show someone engaging with it. I guess like it says right there. And then a link to that resource where you can actually use that resource with your students. So I'm going to, before I forget, go ahead and paste that link in for you. But then I'm going to also show you another feature of GeoGebra that is something that wasn't available on the previous resource, in a way that you can sort of collaborate with students a little more effectively in this way. So I'm going to find where I put it. There it is. All right, so here we go. This multiplying fractions. It's a silent video, so there won't be any volume, but you can kind of see how this resource works. So you've got one slider that allows you to change your fraction, your numerator and denominator, and then a slider that's actually going to move them on top of each other and multiply them so that you can see what that quotient is, and you can physically see that overlap happen. So I'm going to open this up. This is also free. You do have to sign in, but it's a free account. If you have a Google account, you can link your Google account to do that as well. So now I'm actually on this resource. So this is something that I can share, that I can share and do with students. So I can use this to demonstrate. I can change my numerator, can change my denominator. So let's do 4/9 times 2/3. All right, so I've set up my fractions. I'm doing 4/9 times 2/3, and to multiply them, I want to know, what is 2/3 of 4/9? What is 2/3 times 4/9? So I can slide and see that overlap happen, and now I have my newly partitioned shape. So now I have 27 parts, and we can actually see the 27 parts. I can count now. This, we can look at it as this one that was in ninths has now, each of those ninths has been cut into thirds. So we now have 27 parts. And then I can see the overlap there. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. So 2/3 times 4/9 is 8/27. So this is something that I can visually show. Now we're starting to get a little bit more into the modification because of the way that I can adapt this. This is something we would typically see as a visual representation, and then students would then color it in. But this is allowing us with technology to let that happen and to have a lot more flexibility than a million sheets of paper to draw and shade and highlight and crosshatch and do all of that. And then another great thing on GeoGebra, and this is something, again, I'm going to let you, if you want to kind of play on your own, you can, this little button, create class. So I've got to sign in here. And again, you can just use your Google account. I could give it a name or give it a title. I'm just going to stick with that default. And now this, I would show this to my students. And so I'm going to ask everyone here to do that. So go to geogebra.org/classroom. And then I want you to type in this code. So you may have to go back and forth between a couple tabs. So I'll give it a minute. But go to geogebra.org/classroom and then type in this code. And we will see what happens. So don't use the link that I gave you. That link I gave you is going to take you to that landing page that had all of them. You're going to go to geogebra.org/classroom, type in the code. Oh, I see I've got a student that has now joined in. And as more students join, so students are joining. I'm seeing your names pop up. So this is a great way to interact live with students. This is something I could do if all my students were in my classroom. This is something that I could do if all of my students were at home and synchronously. And this is something I could do if I have some students in the classroom and some students at home synchronously. I can also see a task overview, some different tasks that are in here as well. And so you could just sort of explore this on your own. But I wanted you to see, this had a lot more in it than what I just showed you. So you can do some more, some exploring of this on your own. You can edit these things as well. What tasks are in there. Unfortunately, for time's sake, I can't go too deep. But I did want to show you this because this gives just a great way to connect virtually with your students to some more great virtual resources that, again, are sort of getting us beyond augmentation. Now we're modifying and even redefining how students can interact. And then the last one that I want to show you, Desmos. This is another one. If you're familiar at all or worked in secondary, this one may be one that you're also familiar with. It generally is more towards secondary, but they do have some new great elementary resources as well. And so the link that I shared with you for Desmos is similar to the GeoGebra link I shared with you. It's going to take you to sort of a landing page for all of the elementary resources that Desmos has to offer. And Desmos works similar, but I think a little better as well than GeoGebra for sharing and working with students. So we're going to do this one more time. You'll see we've got a lot of resources here. I encourage you when we're done to just dig in and play around and click on some of these. But I'm going to open this first one, adding whole numbers. And so when I open that up, it's going to show me all of the different screens that students would see on this task. This task includes some sort of, virtual manipulatives and hands, not hands-on, but virtual hands-on, mouse on, I guess you would call it. But what I love here, again, it is free. You can sign in with Google. I need to do that real quick. Just like with GeoGebra, you can create a class code. So you'll see that I've done that. And to do that, you just hit create class code. You can do this as many times as you want. If you have multiple blocks of math and you need them, you want them done separately, you can create two. But then once you've done that, I'm going to click View Dashboard. And this, a lot like GeoGebra, is what I could share with students. So if I could, everyone go to student.desmos.com, just like you see here, and then you will type in this code. I do also like that Desmos gives me a code-specific URL, so I'm going to paste that in to the chat. And if you want, I'll jump back to that in just a second. I'm going to paste this into the chat. You can just click the link that I just put into the chat, and it will automatically take you there. So you can either click the link in the chat or go to student.desmos.com. All right, I see we've got some joining, so hopefully you can see these names popping up. And so hopefully now what you're seeing is the task with some instructions. Desmos will allow you to create your own tasks or use the thousands of pre-made tasks that are already on here. And many of the pre-made tasks, they're all sort of like vetted and checked out. So they're good tasks. You can trust them. It is a great resource. And a lot of them have great instructions. So I would never encourage you to give something to students without previewing it and doing it yourself. But you can trust that you're not going to have to do a ton of pre-teaching to have students use some of these tasks. They're very, very self-explanatory. And something that I really like about Desmos, I'm going to take this off, is I can actually see live who's in, what task they're on, what screen they're on, and what they have completed and what they have gotten right. And I can actually click on a screen and see everyone's screen live, what everyone is doing. I see there's 17 people on the first slide here. There are one of you on this slide here. We don't have anyone on 3 through 8 yet. So another great way to interact with students, whether they're in your classroom or whether they're at home, or a combination of the two. In Desmos, I would really encourage you, just get in and play around. They have lots of help and guides. All of them have, I'm going to back up a little bit here to the main page. All of them have teacher guides with instructions. Many of them are downloadable. So you could download sort of a teacher guide that's going to have some different guiding questions and things. I wanted to pull up student view here so that I can see what you guys are seeing. So student view is going to allow you to sort of preview and play with this task before you wanted to assign it to students to kind of see what is there. So I don't know if anybody's actually watching my screen now or if everyone is sort of playing with it on their own. I guess I could find out just by going back to the dashboard, kind of seeing where everyone's at. It looks like everyone's going through the task. So we've got some all the way up to 4, working on 4 now. And again, I love, and I'll leave it up now so that when you come back to the tab, you can share the screen. It's also going to show you not just how far everyone's progressing, but what they've gotten right as well. And I can also anonymize the names. At the top left, it gives me this anonymize button. So I could actually share this with students. This is something I could put up on the screen or share in a virtual environment and not worry about sharing student work and all of the issues that may come with that. I can share student work in an anonymous way, so that I can get all the benefits of sharing student work, but none of the drawbacks. So again, it's just the top left gives me that button, anonymize. If your students are savvy, they'll try to figure out who is who with their names, and sometimes students will own up to it. But we do the best we can with it. All right, I'll give y'all, it looks like pretty much everyone's still playing on Desmos, so I'll give y'all another minute or so to play there before I start wrapping everything up.
Jacob.
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you tell us how you got to this, what you're showing us right now, like how you can see all the students and all that? Can you show us that real quick?
Yeah, so that's not something you guys would be able to see right now because this is something that I created on my account. But when you're on one of the tasks in Desmos, oop, I went too far. There we go. When you're on one of the tasks in Desmos, and all of these links on the left, you can explore. The Desmos link that I gave you to begin with is a link that's going to take you to all of the elementary tasks. So these are the ones that are pertinent to elementary. So once you have a task opened, you can click here, this green button, create class code, and that's going to allow you to create this class codes like what I shared with you. You'll see that I have 23 students, so 23 of you guys I shared this code with you and you've joined. So just view dashboard right here next to that is going to take me to, first of all, the screen where I can share with students what that code is so that students can get set up there. But then once I close that little window, the default is taking me to this screen.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And this is there for all of the tasks on Desmos. And like I said, if you work in the elementary and the secondary world, Desmos really gets amazing in secondary. Probably 90%, maybe more, 95% of the resources on Desmos are for secondary. But you can create your own tasks in Desmos as well. So I'm going to come out of here and just go back to kind of the home page for Desmos. Make sure I'm signed in. Yep, I'm signed in. So on the left menu, custom, this will allow me to make custom ones. Now there's a big learning curve in making your own, but I will say the more tasks that you, the more pre-made tasks that you use, the more you'll learn the different features and options that you have with Desmos, the easier it will be to create your own tasks. But one of the benefits, again, I think the biggest benefit is you're able to sort of see that live view of what students are doing, where they're at, and how they're doing. And you can even share the anonymous version of that. So another really great way to do that. And here again, we're talking more about modification and redefinition than we are the substitution and the augmentation. All right, so just a little reflection here in the chat, if you will. What are some of the benefits and drawbacks of virtual manipulatives? So what we've seen today, what do you think, just wrapping everything up all together, some of the benefits and drawbacks? Looks like we already got responses there. Yeah, I think that's a big one. As a school, talking about what you're going to use. Now they are all free web-based platforms, so it's not. I don't imagine it's something that a school would officially adopt. But certainly, you know, as a math department, if everyone's on the same page, it's going to make things a lot easier from planning to that kind of vertical articulation of students. If I'm using the same resources from second grade to third grade, third grade to fourth grade, it's just going to make it easier every year. There's always teachers who are more comfortable with technology than others. So if everyone's using the same resources, that allows teachers to support each other in much more helpful manners as well. So those are certainly site-based conversations that would need, you know, that would need to happen to make this work optimally. But they are just all free web-based resources. And free web-based is certainly cheaper than actual concrete manipulatives. If there's any first-year teachers out there, I still have a drawer full of the homemade manipulatives from my first few years because I was broke and could not afford manipulatives, and I wasn't lucky enough to have inherited a set or be at a school that had a set they could give me. And anything I did have, I just had a teacher set. Certainly didn't have anything I could give to students. This is free and infinite. Yeah, I'm seeing a couple comments, drawbacks about, you know, the computers and the learning curve and using computers. So certainly a drawback. But again, I think that's something that we're going to have to cross that bridge no matter what this year. And I think we've already, you know, made some strides on that bridge because of the position we were put in that last quarter of last school year. But again, that doesn't mean we can forget about it. Yep, kindergarten definitely going to be tough, but you know, if you've got any kindergarten students that are virtual students that you're going to be responsible for, that are synchronous virtual students, you know, I would assume they're going to have parents at home or someone at home that's older. I wouldn't leave my 6-year-old at home alone to be a virtual student. So hopefully, you know, some pre-teaching to parents or guardians as well could help. I will put my email address and my phone number in the chat. It's also on one of the slides that I will link into the calendar as well. All right, and then just a couple more considerations, some things that that I think are really important. That if I were going into the classroom this year, things that would be heavy on my mind right now as I'm planning virtual manipulatives, interface and devices. What options are students going to have? Are they working on a class set of Chromebooks? Are they working on a class set of MacBooks? That's going to determine how I pre-teach, how students are going to share things back with me, what resources are available. Am I one-to-one? Am I not one-to-one? Student arrangement. How are students going to be arranged in your classroom and out of your classroom? Are all of your students in the room? Are half your students in the room? If they are all in the room, how are they in the room? You know, and again, yeah, wish we knew. I think considering all options is what's most important right now. I know that makes it much more difficult. But the good thing is something like these resources are highly adaptable. These are things you can use in brick and mortar, in social isolation, in a virtual world, in an asynchronous world, in a synchronous world. They are highly adaptable. I would also be really concerned about the equity that comes along with some of these, based on devices that are available to students in the school, devices that are available to students at home. If your students are at home, is the school providing a device? If the school is providing a device, but the student doesn't have access to high-speed internet, the device is a brick. So at least concerning these web-based platforms. So certainly thinking about all of that. The SAMR model, you know, where is it falling and what is appropriate for my students? Something that I think we take for granted as teachers because we're so used to manipulatives is we think, and I know I'm guilty of this, I think rods, flats, and units, unifix cubes, colored counters, I think those things are much more concrete than they actually are. The truth is there is a removal from actual real concrete things that students are coming to you naturally with to the traditional concrete manipulatives that we use in the classroom. They're not 100% concrete. There is a slight abstract removal when I'm using those manipulatives. So if I'm working in K or 1, where students are still learning how to make the connections between real life and manipulatives, they don't naturally connect to them the way we do or the way older students do. If I use a virtual resource that is purely substitution, I'm now taking them even one step further away from the concrete world that they are coming to me with into the abstract mathematic world. So maybe substitution isn't appropriate at first in some grade levels, and maybe substitution is appropriate. So I would, I wouldn't use something just because it's redefinition and I think it's amazing, or just because it's substitution and I'm comfortable with the substitution because it's a resource that I have used. So thinking about all of that. And then again, we talked a little bit about this pre-teaching. What things are going to have to be pre-taught for students to be successful with this, from using the manipulatives. I mean, signing on to a computer. Hopefully we got past all of that in last quarter as students had to go virtual and the distance learning and the asynchronous learning. But what are the 100 things that they're going to have to know before they even start interacting with the manipulatives? So hopefully I got you thinking. Hopefully some things that you can take back and use, some different models of instruction, some different resources to use for instruction. If you are not a classroom teacher and you're working with classroom teachers, feel free to share this link. Once you have the link to the recording with those teachers, feel free to connect them with me. Feel free to call them and beg them to join at 1 o'clock today when we do the secondary. And you can always reach out. I'll hang out here for a minute in case any more comments come in the chat, but officially I'll wrap this up. Thank you all so much, and thank you for all the collaboration today.